Hey everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to Inquirer Live. Don't panic, vote. I'm Jonathan Lai. I'm the data and democracy reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, which means I cover voting rights and elections here in Pennsylvania. It's 15 days out from Election Day. It is the last day to register to vote. And so today I'm joined by Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, a Democrat, and Philadelphia City Commissioner Al Schmidt, a Republican, for a bipartisan discussion about mail ballots, in-person voting, and everything you need to know before Election Day. I know that a lot of you have some anxiety around what's going on. There's a lot of misinformation, but don't worry. I've got two of the Commonwealth's most recognizable politicians here to help calm all of our fears and get the facts out there. A couple of housekeeping details before we get started, just so that you know how to participate in today's event. At any time during the discussion, you have the opportunity to submit your questions for Lieutenant Governor Fetterman and Commissioner Schmidt. To do so, all you have to do is type your questions into the comments below on inquirer.com/vote event. So if you're on the page right now, it's down there. Type your questions in and I'll get to them. As time allows, we will address as many of these questions as we can during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Only questions that are submitted there will be read. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever else, make sure you go to the page and drop those questions in there. All right, so here are our two guests for the day. First is Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, elected in 2018. He is the second in command for Pennsylvania. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Senate, and he is large and in charge and has one of the best Twitter feeds that you will find coming out of Pennsylvania government. We also have Philadelphia City Commissioner Al Schmidt, who is, as I said, Republican. He is one of three commissioners responsible for running elections in the city of Philadelphia. And together we have this bipartisan panel, and I am so excited to have you. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just want to start really basic. Today is the deadline to register to vote. I've heard from people who don't really necessarily always understand what that means. They're not sure what they're signing themselves up for. They think sometimes signing up to vote is casting a ballot or something. What does it mean to register to vote? And why should people do it?
Commissioner?
In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, unlike a lot of other states, you have to register to vote in advance of Election Day before you cast your vote. A couple of years ago, or last year and before that, the deadline was 30 days out. Thanks to some election reforms that made it through Harrisburg last year, the deadline is now 15 days before Election Day, and that day is today. And it's how you are able to cast your vote on Election Day and make your voice heard.
And it's really easy to do. You just hop online at votepa.com, or excuse me, .org, and you just it's very simple. I mean, and I just want to encourage everybody that it's not a complicated process. It's your ticket to participating in the most consequential election that I think we can all agree of our lives here today. And today is that deadline.
That's right. So Pennsylvania, we can go to votespa.com and we can register online. You can register by mail, but it might be too late, right, Commissioner Schmidt?
Well, we have to have the applications received today or postmarked by today at our offices. So our office in Philadelphia is open until midnight tonight to accept registrations. The activity has been down a little bit compared to other presidential elections. That's probably because of the COVID environment. People aren't knocking on doors as much. They're not, at public events as much, registering people. So it's especially important that that they be mindful that today is the deadline to either drop off your application or get it postmarked in the mail to us.
And talk to me about what it means, what's the process like if I show up in person to try to register to vote? Is that a long process? Is it laborious? Like, what am I actually doing?
It's a very simple application process that's really asking if you're over the age of 18, if you're a United States citizen, your address, your name, and there's there are safeguards built into this process. You provide the last four of your social security number, or you provide your driver's license number or state Commonwealth issued ID number for Pennsylvania, and you sign it, and we scan in that signature with your application, and you're registered to vote. We have been working very hard for many weeks now to make sure that we don't have a backlog of registrations going into the deadline. In previous presidential elections, we might have 50,000 voter registration applications dropped on us on the deadline. And we had 30 days to process them. Now we only have really a few days to process them, because we want to make sure that voters are registered in advance of Election Day, that they receive a voter registration card from us, that they receive a postcard telling them where their polling place is, and all the rest. But the process is very simple.
And you guys are on top of that in Philadelphia, no doubt, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, like pushing the backlog down to zero by the time you hit the deadline was a lesson learned from, I think, 2012, where we had, like I said, 50,000 dropped on us on a single day. So we've been working very hard to prepare for this day, which is the deadline, when we normally get hit with a lot of online applications and a lot of paper applications normally.
And so what should...
Oh, go ahead, John.
Well, so once I've submitted that application, what at this point is your turnaround time, and how do I know that I'm registered and I can go and vote?
Well, the application comes into us, and we have our voter registration and election clerks enter in those voter registration forms. We get a lot of duplicate registrations, applications, especially in years like this. People are, concerned that they're registered to vote, and they'll register again and again and again. In Pennsylvania, you have to be inactive for 7 years or miss 14 elections in a row before your voter registration is canceled. And that's not the case. If people register again and again, and they get processed pretty quickly.
And can you use a Dropbox?
Well, our office is going to be open until midnight for people at Delaware and Spring Garden, or Columbus Boulevard and Spring Garden, for people to drop off a voter registration application.
Got it. So I think one of the things that has been causing a lot of anxiety for voters this year is the new option to vote by mail without having to provide an excuse or anything like that. First of all, before we even start talking about the logistics of it, what are the benefits of voting by mail versus showing up in person, recognizing that people can choose to do either one? Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I think in a pandemic, I think health and safety is primarily the benefit. And this idea that you can sit on your couch and vote at home, and Pennsylvania is paying the postage. It couldn't be any simpler. And I always try to emphasize to individuals, it's like, trust the United States Postal Service. All across Pennsylvania's 67 counties, if you drop your ballot in the mail, it's a local delivery going to a local destination. So we don't ship them to Anchorage, Alaska, and then they come back. It's like, if you live in Potter County, it's going to be delivered within Potter County. And in Philadelphia, the same thing. It's a very straightforward process. There's so much noise and chaos associated now that was designed to create just that, this kind of distraction, when the truth of the matter is, and the commissioner can know, that vote by mail in Pennsylvania is safe, secure, and 100% true.
So, Commissioner, can you walk me through the actual process of voting by mail? How do I apply, and then how do I fill out my ballot?
Can I add one other quick thing to the last question? And that is, we have vote by mail now. We have our satellite Board of Elections offices open now. There are lines all day, but they move pretty quickly. So we're getting people going through. And I look out at those lines, and I'm realizing every one of these people, every one of these voters who's submitting a mail-in ballot or is in line in advance to apply for a mail-in ballot and vote it is one fewer person in line on election day. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to vote by mail and you choose to vote by mail, you're making it easier for people on election day who will be voting at the polls, because you're basically taking yourself out of the line because you've already cast your vote or submitted your vote to us. So the more mail-in ballots that we receive and process, mail out and come back, the fewer people there are in line on election day.
All right, so walk me through how I actually do that.
So if you submit a mail-in ballot or a mail-in ballot application to us, it actually looks very similar to a voter registration form. It's asking for a couple of different identifiers. We look you up in the voter registration system to confirm that you are in fact a registered voter, and we process your mail-in ballot application and then mail out the mail-in ballot to you. It's very straightforward. It goes directly from the Board of Elections to the United States Postal Service to the voter. If the voter wants to mail it back through the Postal Service, they need to put it in the mail, before Election Day, so it gets back to us. They shouldn't wait. If you have any interest in voting by mail, there is no reason to wait. Once you get your ballot, if you know who you're voting for, I'm not suggesting anyone rush through it, but if you know who you're voting for, to complete your ballot and mail it back to us at your earliest convenience. That way we can do as much organizing of those ballots as possible before Election Day to count as many mail-in ballots as possible. We can't begin counting them until Election Day, which is something that our county is going to face as a challenge, and all the other counties in the Commonwealth, is that we cannot begin opening the envelopes that the ballots are in until election morning. And that's there's a lot of work involved in that. And I wish we could do that before Election Day without counting any votes or anything like that. So it's something we're very much focused on.
And I'm hopeful, although we don't know whether or not a compromise will emerge over these next couple of days here in Harrisburg. Certainly, it's the governor's position and mine that we need to have more time for canvassing, early canvassing. This is not controversial, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, whatever. This idea that somehow that I think it's important. I mean, we want to make sure that these counties are able to deliver the results in a timely manner. And why, if they have them, why wouldn't they be allowed to count them through the same process and technology? They would count them at 7 o'clock in the morning on Election Day as well, too. And I just want to add something off what the commissioner said. Commissioner, if you're in possession of your mail-in ballot and you've already filled it out and you've made sure you use the secrecy envelope, is there a reason not to just drop it in the mail? I mean, would you trust the United States Postal Service?
Lieutenant Governor, there is still plenty of time for someone to drop a ballot in the mail to us and make it back to us in time. I'm probably dating.
Commissioner.
Looks like we've lost him. Oh,
I'm sorry. I apologize. I remember when the Postal Service was able to deliver mail 1 to 2 days. And it might not be 1 to 2 days anymore. It might be just a little bit longer, but there's still plenty of time to mail it back. And if you're concerned about it, if you have any anxiety about it whatsoever, we have Board of Elections offices open throughout the city. We now have 3 24-hour-a-day mail-in ballot drop boxes for voters to return their ballot to us directly if they're concerned for some reason. But
24 hours a day.
Yeah, we have 3 that are 24/7, and we also have more than a dozen offices open. As of today, we have 17 offices open that will accept mail-in ballots through kind of working hours during the day, and the hours are on our website.
Yeah. And also, Commissioner, as long as the ballot is postmarked by Election Day, there's a 3-day leg or tail onto that, correct?
Yeah, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled a couple of weeks ago that mail-in ballots that are received by the Board of Elections up until Friday after Election Day should be counted unless they're postmarked or have some indication on them that they've been mailed after Election Day. So if we get a mail-in ballot that was postmarked, Wednesday after the election, that would not count. But we have up until Friday to get those ballots in and to count them.
A lot's been made out of the whole naked ballot situation, and I never really understood that. I mean, yes, we want to educate our voters, but at the end of the day, Commissioner, do you believe that the instructions are complicated, or there's a high bar to clear here, or is it just if you follow the directions, there's virtually 100% chance your ballot is going to be counted? Is that fair?
Yes, and it is very straightforward. Strangely, it seems like a lot of the chatter out there and a lot of the anxiety that's out there that's important for us to cut past or get through or whatever is actually causing people to make errors when they're completing their application. They just, like, I went to a mail-in ballot application center the other day, and I stood there and I was filling out my declaration envelope. And in my head, I'm saying, don't write your birthday. Don't write your birthday. Don't write your birthday. Whatever you do, don't write your birthday. And I fill it out, and I get the month, the day right, and I write 1971 at first, which I have to cross out and correct. But we want the right zone is to make people mindful of what they need to do. And it isn't complicated. It isn't difficult. It's just important to pay attention to the directions, to not wait until the last minute. The deadlines are, a week before Election Day. It's difficult for people to submit their application to us on that deadline, for us to process it that day and the next day, to mail it out to them, for them to get it, for them to mail it back. Like, that's a tight window. If you don't wait till the last minute and you don't let this noise get to you, then it's a pretty simple process and your vote is going to be counted.
This idea, I mean, as far as I know, we're the only bipartisan kind of conversation that I've seen happening. There's one side that claims that vote by mail is fraudulent and it's going to be subject to all kinds of cheating and whatever, and that's just not true. This idea, as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't one instance of voter fraud detected in June's primary. Is that also an accurate statement?
Yeah, we had no evidence of intentional voter fraud in the last primary. It's our first experience with it, but we had 175,000 Philadelphians cast their vote by mail in the primary. And it's so important for people to rely on voices that they trust for accurate information to be explained to them, calmly and reliably. And in the legislature, as you know, vote by mail was brought about through Republican votes in the House, and Republican
a lot more Republicans than Democrats voted for it. In fact, I'm not sure how many members of the Philadelphia delegation in the House or Senate voted for vote by mail. And so this idea that this is not a fundamentally bipartisan bill with massive Republican support is a lie. It absolutely is. And that's why I'm so delighted and honored to be with you today, Commissioner, because to cut through this deliberate chaos, that chaos is attached to an agenda. And that agenda is to create as much confusion and uncertainty about the voting by mail process in Pennsylvania. And the very essence of what you do is to count these votes. There's not one single Democrat that I know of that of any stature is alleging that there's going to be widespread fraud in a deeply red county in Pennsylvania. Not one. Certainly not me. I trust the process. I trust these counties. These are dedicated professionals that, this is their calling. So to cut through that and just say, trust the United States Postal Service, trust the vote by mail process. I don't know, of 175,000 votes in Philadelphia, not one documented case of intentional voter fraud. That is a remarkable statistic. Instead of reading, some tweet from someone online that says so-and-so is whatever, it's like, stick to the facts.
Social media is such a helpful tool in sharing information. It's also a very effective tool in sharing misinformation. And there are certainly voices out there who are attempting to undermine confidence in the election by spreading misinformation. And we see it every day. And we're a very small, city department in Philadelphia. It's difficult for us sometimes. It feels like we're trying to hold back the tide when, waves of misinformation come our way, and someone posts something and it goes viral and it's everywhere. And then our phones light up in our offices about reports of something that is going on that is entirely fabricated. And, we have a job to do. And we do our best to communicate as best we can, truthful and reliable information about voting by mail and voting at the polls on election day if you choose.
Talk to me about the security of those ballots, since there is such concern around fraud and security and stuff like that. If I've sent my ballot in, what actually happens to it? How are you securing it before and after it's counted?
It comes to the Philadelphia Board of Elections office. We have our City Hall location, and we've also acquired pretty considerable space at the Pennsylvania Convention Center for these processes. We have security at those locations. We have Philadelphia Sheriff's Department has been a really incredible partner in helping us with all of this. So from all of our Board of Elections offices, those ballots are delivered from the Board of Elections office to our central collecting point Board of Election office by the Philadelphia Sheriff's Department. So there is a chain of custody the whole way. And when we get them in, we have to begin processing them. We scan the barcodes on the backs of the envelopes. When voters provide an email address, for example, they get a notification from us saying that we've received their ballot. Or if they follow it on the vote tracker tool that the Pennsylvania Department of State has, they can see the status of it there. It isn't always in real time. And it isn't, the system wasn't built for this purpose. The statewide system was built nearly 20 years ago and really was intended for Board of Elections to use, not voters to kind of track the exact status as you might track a, package from Federal Express on its way to you. But it is helpful in letting voters know and giving reassurance that their ballot's been received. If they've turned their ballot into us, it has been received. I will have people drop off their ballot at City Hall and 2 hours later send messages saying they haven't gotten a notification yet. Or even 2 days later, they haven't gotten a notification yet. We may not have just scanned the barcode on that ballot yet.
Can I, Jonathan and Commissioner, can I ask what I think is a really important issue that I see emerging? I have my mail-in ballot, but I have let some of this chaos make me think, well, I don't want to vote by mail. I want to just go in person, And I think that's dangerous, and I think that's one of the main agenda points of the other side trying to create this chaos. So what happens if you say, you know what, I don't need this ballot. I'm going to just go show up to the polls on election day. What would happen? Can you do that?
Yeah, voters can have that option. They can show up to the polls and bring their mail-in ballot with them, surrender that to their.
What if they don't? What if they don't bring it, Commissioner? What happens?
So there's really two paths. If you've requested a mail-in ballot, you either bring it with you and surrender it, and then you sign an affidavit, and the board signs an affidavit, and then you can sign the poll book and then vote on the machine. If you don't bring it with you, you have to cast a provisional ballot, which is in effect like a mail-in ballot. It's a paper ballot where you're marking your selections. And the damage or the harm or the injury is that you're potentially slowing down voting.
Jamming it up. Exactly.
And that's who are going to vote, in person from the jump because of one reason or another, they didn't get around to it or they prefer to vote that way. The concern is that you're potentially adding to those lines instead of subtracting to those lines.
provisional ballots have always been meant to be like the fail-safe. They're not very common typically. Now, but if you have, of the 2.7 million ballots that have been requested, what if 10%? That's 270,000 voters across Pennsylvania saying, whoa, I changed my mind, and they're going to show up. And you have to bring everything with you. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a provisional ballot. And that right there is going to add enormous lengths to the voting lines, because that's going to slow things down, because it's not designed to do that. So my message has consistently been, if you have your mail-in ballot, there is zero reason not to trust that and to use it. Now, whether you trust the United States Postal Service or just hand deliver it to any one of your satellites. But that's the thing that concerns me is that someone might say, well, I'm just going to, I'm going to just do it in person. Well, if you don't bring everything that's required, you're going to have to do a provisional ballot, and that is going to run the significant risk of already making what I'm sure will be long lines that much more longer. Is that a fair statement, Commissioner?
It is, especially since the provisional ballot is a paper ballot, just the same as a mail-in ballot is a paper ballot that someone was, otherwise seeking to avoid casting. We want people to vote in whatever manner they are most comfortable in the election. That being said, they should be mindful of the decisions that they're making. And if you're showing up at the polls and you requested a mail-in ballot, you decided not to mail it back, you are adding to the line and to the work the election boards need to do to get voters voting.
Commissioner, you're a Republican in a very Democratic city. Have you seen or witnessed any fraud or some kind of agenda to try to, throw this election or something, or is it just straight up? You guys are doing a remarkable job given the circumstances, and as you said, in June, 175,000 mail-in ballots, and not one instance of fraud.
It's important that I think that talking about voter fraud, there's a universe of people that say that it's widespread, and there's a universe of people that say it's never happened ever. It doesn't happen, at all. And the truth isn't exactly in between, but it's certainly not widespread at all. We don't have any evidence of voter fraud from the primary election, which had, like we said, 175,000 voters. About half the voters in the city voted by mail in that election. Half of the voters in the primary. And right now we're on track for probably about half the voters casting their vote by mail-in ballot. We are closing in on 400,000 mail-in ballot applications processed, which we might hit today. And about
400,000.
Yeah, and about 200,000 back, which we might also hit today with still 2 weeks to go. That's 200,000 fewer voters in line. Polls
that's exactly it, yeah.
Or, I expect it to probably be north of 300,000, maybe 350,000. That could be half of the electorate in Philadelphia that cast their vote on or before Election Day by mail.
So you mentioned the state website and the tracker that can sometimes be confusing to people. It's not always in real time. I have heard from a lot of voters who seem to be worried about their ballot arriving. They'll say things like, the website says it was approved or even mailed, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. At what point should somebody start being concerned that their ballot hasn't arrived yet? And then what do they do about that, Commissioner?
So there's a couple of options. They can apply for a replacement ballot through our website. They can go to any of our satellite locations that are all over the city to request the replacement in person. Even if they got the original ballot and they got the replacement, they can't submit, they won't have 2 votes count. And that's part of what takes a little bit of time when it comes to this whole process. But if you mailed 10 ballots back to us, you don't have 10 votes count, you have 1 vote count, because each envelope has a unique identifier on it, the barcode next to the name that tells us who the voter is. Now that gets separated by the secrecy envelope that we were talking about a little bit ago and the ballot to really separate the vote from the voter, so voters can have confidence that no one will see how they voted. the end of the day, we're processing, hundreds of thousands of these things. No one is looking. No one cares to look to see how anyone voted. But the secrecy envelope kind of creates that separation. The notification system, like you mentioned, it's a little bit clumsy. Like I said, it wasn't designed for this purpose. It isn't necessarily in real time. And it should be, helping to reassure people, not kind of confuse people. Just to give you one quick example, whenever we generate the label for the envelope that gets mailed out, that shows up to the system like your ballot's on its way. But we're just printing the label that's going to go on the envelope that the ballot is going to be put in to go out. So it won't be a long time after that, but it's not necessarily like a real-time indicator for when things are moving along, but it's certainly a helpful tool at the end of the day.
I see. We got a couple of questions in already, so I just want to run through a couple of them with you guys. The first is from Mikhail. She asks, when is the least busy time to hand in a ballot at a satellite office, since you mentioned lines earlier?
So we frequently have lines at the start of the day. Like I was just at the Leah Course Center up at Temple University, and I got there over an hour before it opened. And there was a long line there waiting. So, by the time that people vote, they may have been waiting for, an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes. But an hour or more of that is waiting in line before it even opens. Throughout the day, it's usually very busy in the morning. And then kind of mid-afternoon, they tend to kind of slow down. We see it here in City Hall, just outside of the building. Really big lines in the morning, and then slows down in the afternoon. But I just want to say that even if you see a line, you shouldn't be intimidated by it. The lines move pretty quickly. About 80% of the people in line are dropping off a mail-in ballot that they've already received. They're not having to go and apply for us to generate the ballot, for them to return it. They're just dropping it off, and that takes seconds once they get to the front of the line.
Can I add something to that question? Drop it in the mail. The postage is paid. There's plenty of time. I would say to that person asking that question, it's like, trust the United States Postal Service. Would her ballot ever leave Philadelphia once she drops it in the post office? I mean, she's a Philadelphia voter. It's going to the Philadelphia Board of Elections, and it's going to be stored in a secure location that's guarded. With 15 days to go, there's no reason not to trust the United States Postal Service. To your point that you made earlier, every person in line at those satellite centers is one less person that's going to be in line on election day. Every ballot that's in the mail is one less person in line at it builds up on each other. And This idea that we're collectively responsible for making sure that it's as thoughtful as we can, there is no reason not to trust the United States Postal Service. Because if you don't, then the other side has won. They have created that kind of doubt and chaos. And that's really what they want to do. This idea, she has a right to get in line and stand, and that's fine. But there's always that option too, which there's zero evidence or reason to think that that is not 100% as secure as standing in line at the center.
Well, is there a point? I mean, eventually there is a point at which it's too late to put it in the mail, right? And it would be better to drop off. What's your recommendation for when people need to start thinking about not putting it in the mail?
I would defer to the commissioner on that one.
It's not like I can say a specific day, but what I do know is that mail-in ballots should be postmarked on or before Election Day. Drop-off boxes serve the most useful role in those kind of final days. But since the Pennsylvania Supreme Court extended the deadline for us to receive them back, that was a very significant thing, I think. Because even if you're putting your ballot in the mail in the last few days before Election Day, we can still receive it back up until Friday after Election Day, provided it's mailed on or before Election Day.
And this idea that it's a crushing number of, it's just not true. Philadelphia is how many, 2.5 million, a city of 2.5 million? It's like Christmas cards, and I mean, like the mail delivers hundreds of millions of pieces, every day. This idea that we can no longer trust the United States Postal Service is a destructive urban myth. And, again, every voter can vote in the means that he or she is most comfortable, but do not allow your comfort level to be dictated by propaganda and chaos that is spread online to do just that very same thing. And you have that deadline. As long as that ballot's postmarked and it arrives by that Friday, it's going to count.
And this is the same Postal Service that obviously we rely on for passports being delivered, or tax returns being delivered, or all sorts of other things that we trust the Postal Service to deliver. Sometimes you're, sorry to be cynical, but I feel like a lot of the chatter about the Postal Service in the last, couple months is intentionally designed to erode confidence in it in a way that's totally unwarranted.
Yeah, it's sinister, and you heard it here. You have a Republican commissioner of elections saying that you can trust the United States Postal Service, and that's the message, and that's what everyone should be saying. And it's a sorry commentary when there are people that would suggest otherwise.
So, Commissioner, one of the questions here from Renee, we've gotten some news out of California about fake Dropboxes or unsanctioned ones. How do I make sure that I'm putting my ballot into a legitimate Dropbox that comes from you?
So we have on our website, philadelphiavotes.com, a list of where all of our satellite locations are and where our Dropboxes are. The Inquirer has been very helpful in creating graphics that also help people identify where all those locations are. Billy Penn, another news source in the city, has done the same. And they're all listed there. They say official mail-in ballot drop-off on the side with some other sort of information on them. But if you shouldn't be finding them by accident. We provide a list of where they're all located and where people can return them. I did see that news from California. It's a very curious thing. We haven't seen anything like that here.
Can I also say that's like when I was a kid that people were putting razor blades in apples for trick-or-treating and stuff. I mean, it's just like this idea that there's a conspiracy to create counterfeit, that's part of the garbage that spreads online. And you just can't give into that. Like, you have to try really hard not to have your vote counted in this election in Pennsylvania. Like, you have to try really hard not to have that happen. There are so many different ways you can vote, and there are mechanisms in which you can send your ballot. You can drop it off. You can use a box. You can use the Postal Service. This idea that the odds are that you are going to get that razor blade in your apple, it's just part of the misinformation that they are hoping that foments this general feeling of chaos on election day. So you have people not trusting vote by mail, not trusting the United States Postal Service, because you know what? It benefits an agenda that undermines the votes, the number of votes, and it also undermines or creates this sense of challenging these results. And there is no factual basis to any of that whatsoever.
Well, Commissioner, off of that point, one of the things that we know is that despite, some concerns about, massive voter fraud or something, which there's just not evidence of, you're actually much more likely to have something go wrong by accident with your ballot, like signatures or what we've been calling naked ballots, right? Can you walk us through what are sort of the major things that we should watch for when I'm filling out and submitting my mail-in ballot? What are the things that are sort of common mistakes that I should make sure not to make?
If you follow the instructions, it's actually pretty simple when you go through it, but it's something you should pay attention to. Like, for example, where you sign, you should sign your name. Where it says date, you should write the date. Lots of chatter the last couple weeks about secrecy envelopes, which, as we talked about before, is the envelope the ballot goes into, and that envelope is in the declaration envelope, the part that you fill out on the back and sign. By far the most common would be people who didn't sign it at all, or fill it out at all. Secrecy envelopes, there's been just so much information about that I'm hopeful that will lessen the number of ballots that we get back. It was really, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling, I understand they had no choice. The law says that the ballot must be in a secrecy envelope. It's really distressing. Every vote is precious to us. And it's not really a question of whether the voter is a registered voter or whether the ballot that they cast was cast by them. So it's really, it hurts you to see ballots returned to us in any way that is a fatal defect. There's not a lot of them. If you follow the directions and the checklist on the envelope and the instructions, it's pretty simple.
And can I say, you may not like or agree with that ruling, but that's the rules in which this election is going to be carried out on. So this idea that you're not endorsing the fact that it wouldn't count, but it's just like it won't. But follow the directions. They're like the shampoo, like rinse, repeat, lather. It's very straightforward, and there's virtually no chance that it's going to go awry if you just simply follow those directions. There's any number of factors. You might be held at work too late. Your car could break down. There's any number of theoreticals that could stop you from voting. But if you are in the possession of a mail-in ballot right now, vote immediately, get it in the mail, trust the United States Postal Service, or if you are going to get in line and drop off, that's fine too. But think of this, every ballot in the Postal Service, care, custody, and control, is one less person in line at the drop-off box. Every person at the drop-off box center throughout Pennsylvania and Philadelphia is one less person in line on election day. And all of this builds to create a smooth election day experience that will produce results that were secure and are true, and will be able to provide the result that reflects the true democratic will of Pennsylvania's voters.
All right. And one last question for you, Commissioner. What do I do if I realized now, listening to you, I've actually forgot to fill out my signature, or I've sent in a naked ballot, or I did put my birthday in or something like that? What can I actually do about it at this point?
So we've sought guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of State for what options exist for voters still. The concern is that people will get too spooked by all of this, and they did everything right. They mailed the ballot in, and then they're gonna like show up at the polling place and try to vote on the machine or vote by provisional ballot, even though they've already cast their vote by mail. Again, there's not going to be any way in which two votes are cast at the end of the day.
Can you say that again, Commissioner? Please, can you say that again for the people in the back? Can you say that again?
There's a process in place to prevent voters from casting more than one vote, whether they are cast in the mail or in the mail and in person on election day at your polling place. It's a little bit of why the process isn't instantaneous. There's a lot of work we have to do on the back end to make sure that doesn't occur. But we do that work to make sure that doesn't occur. So it's not a question of compromising the integrity of the election. The real harm is that people contribute to lines and they contribute to the waits on election day when they kind of are overcome with anxiety because of what they're hearing on social media or otherwise, and actually do harm to the process at the end of the day.
All right, Lieutenant Governor, I understand you have to go and get those senators in line. So Lieutenant Governor and Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion. And
thank you for this opportunity. And, and I want to thank the Commissioner for this bipartisan, coming together to just let everyone know that vote by mail in Pennsylvania and voting is safe, secure, and true. And thank you, Jonathan, and the Inquirer for hosting us.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for the work that you do, kind of cutting through a lot of this. and you, Jonathan, and the Inquirer as well, in helping to educate and inform voters of what's going on. One last plug, it's the deadline to register to vote. You should, if you haven't registered to vote yet, you should go online and apply online or get your application to us today.
Tune out the chaos online. Tune it out. There's always an agenda attached to the chaos. Tune it out, follow the instructions, vote, and you're going to be able to trust the result. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And as the title says, don't panic, vote. Thank you.